Everybody, we're live.
Right.
All
Yeah.
right.
So we're live, and this is number 2 of the Happy Dragons live chats. This time we have Phil Arids only with us because he was a part of the webinar that happened shortly before this, along with Roy. So we spoke about this last time. We kind of introduced what we're trying to do with the live chats, and it's basically it's like a perpetual Q&A. It's basically if people have questions, which I answer questions on a daily basis. I'm sure Roy and Phil do also endless questions, and
Yes.
and it's something we're happy to do. So we kind of do this as an open invitation for anyone to come and join, ask any questions, whether it's pertaining to a recent webinar, recent news. Like, to the best of our knowledge, we want to provide people a live feedback, a back and forth to discuss and answer questions, help where we can, or even just be introduced new topics to ourselves. So, this is one of those fields that is finally seems to the ball is rolling. It's changing, it's advancing, and we want to stay up to date with that and do that with the community.
Yeah.
So that's that. And we do Happy Dragons currently has a Discord server that anyone is welcome to join, and they can at any time ask their questions there too. We do have our team of very fancy schmancy people that are very well regarded, very knowledgeable in their specific fields. So it's not just us three.
No, it's just us.
Yeah, it's not just us who can help you, because obviously it's impossible to pose that kind of knowledge on just one person. So that's what we're doing with Happy Dragons. We're building a team of people who are sources of knowledge and are happy to share that and are very helpful individuals. So in the Discord, anyone's welcome. I'll post a chat link of the invite, and it'll also be in the description of this video.
Yeah, two quick things. I'd like to. One thing I want to add to that, but before I do, Savannah, could you? I want to put this up on my Instagram, like right now, just to say that we're like live right now. But I'm like technology stupid. How do I make that? Is there like a link I can?
I've never gone live on Instagram. But,
I just meant like post the link for this live.
For this, I could give you the link on Instagram and you can copy and paste it.
Would you? That'd be awesome.
I would be more than happy to do that.
Thank you. And then the follow up was just, something that I've been thinking about recently has been that the answering questions thing. It's kind of an interesting thing to talk about because sometimes questions can be challenging, like for many different reasons, right? Whether it's, that the questions are not necessarily coming from a place of good faith. Maybe the questions can sometimes feel like people want easy answers and don't just want to do a little bit of research themselves and this whole thing, right? But what I've realized, and maybe I'm sure other people have thought about this and know and are like, duh, dummy, but it's a lot like it's teaching, right? It's teaching on some level. So thinking about this like in the same way that I would think about like the typical questions that I get from like white and blue belt students in jiu-jitsu, like sometimes they're repetitive, sometimes they're the same questions, sometimes maybe easy questions to answer, difficult questions to answer, questions that don't really have a clear answer because maybe that person, at least in the case of jiu-jitsu, they may not be ready technically or skill wise for like what the next level means or looks like. So it's there are questions that might not apply, right? But this is so true of everything we do in herpetoculture too. And so something that I think I really enjoy, and I know Roy enjoys, and I know you enjoy, Savannah, is like, we like answering questions because number one, it's a way of educating and giving back and giving to people and helping them overcome whatever challenges that they're experiencing with their animals. But it's also a way of continuing to keep those wheels turning for yourself. Like I can't think of anything exact right at this moment, but there have been many, many instances in which someone has asked me a question and I realized that I had already answered the question, or I already had I know what the answer is. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't doing that myself, or I haven't been paying enough attention to that myself. So it's like, it's a way of bringing some of the fundamentals back into your day to day. I really,
that encompasses the whole issue and solution, in my opinion, because
Mhm.
like I can think of a few subjects, especially related to herpetoculture, where topics are introduced and not explained.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so it's
Yeah.
kind of like when someone asks you a question, you're just kind of like, oh man, well, do you have time to sit down? Like, because it can be really overwhelming. It's a
Yeah.
lot to learn at first, but then once
Yep.
you get the hang of it, it's actually quite simple. Like whether it's going bioactive or actually processing what gut loading means. Like those are the
Or
two
any of it.
common ones.
Yeah,
So it's like, all right, this is gonna be overwhelming, but I
totally.
promise it's really, really, really simple. Once you understand like a lot of the terminology, that's probably the hardest thing to navigate.
Right, definitely. Yeah, and and even the terminology I think is key on some level. I've had so many people really recently. This is just happens every time it's baby season and people are getting ready for their Euro or whatever it may be. There's always a lot of questions around which UVB bulb do I get, and what does T5 mean, and what is what is zone 1 through 4, like, because have the Reptile Systems brand, which
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these others, all these other companies, they use the percentages as it's a percentage UVB output.
They tie it to an animal.
Yeah, and they tie it to an animal, but then Reptile Systems is taking a different track with that now, going with like zone 1 through 4 in reference to Ferguson zones, and an attempt.
And then that's a whole nother topic people
Yeah,
don't know
which is like a
how
whole
to explain.
Yeah, and I totally get it that it can be kind of overwhelming on some level. Again, I think we talk about this regularly, but the sort of the interesting ways that what we do in herpetoculture overlaps to some degree with aquaculture and saltwater aquaria and all these, and other culturation type practices that involve making a system or dealing with many moving parts to get sort of an ongoing result. It can be like a heady topic sometimes, and which is why it's great to have easy access, easily digested information, so that way you can take the steps as you need to. Sometimes I meet people who they're about to buy their first Euro from me, and they know more about lighting than I do, like far and away, like a lot more.
Yeah.
And they're like, how do I, at what range and with this bulb and with the thing, and I'm like, I don't know, dude. Get a UVB meter. I have no idea. Like,
yeah, there are some things that can answer their own questions, but it's never bad to like consult someone who's like working in it. But it is definitely I had a conversation a while ago with Thomas Griffiths, and we were talking about something. I can't remember what it was, but it was basically that there are so many things in the hobby that are oversimplified to the point where they're no longer understood.
Sure. Like, give me an example.
Like with gut loading, people say make sure your insects are gut loaded, and they don't explain what that actually is.
Sure.
It's not hard to figure out that portion.
That's a great example.
But there's still like a lot more to it, like a digestion period, a rotating amount of food through the feeders, especially if you're dealing with obligate insectivores. You don't want to, like, once you get into the dynamics of nutrition and vitamins, and then splitting those groups up so small, literally downsizing them to the size of a feeder insect.
Right.
There's a lot where people will worry and cause more damage.
Yep.
Versus kind of not trusting the process, but not overthinking it. But like UVB lights, for example, is another one. If you get the 12%, there's a bearded dragon on the box, but it's not a prescribed box. It's a lamp strength, and it should be represented as such, so it's better understood, not misinterpreted, because there's so many, like you said, moving pieces, like enclosure lids, or whether you're doing external versus internal lighting that base those. So it's not black and white, but so many things in the hobby that are somewhat complex or takes time to explain, in my opinion, have been oversimplified. And then when you're dealing with fewer words, it's much easier sometimes to misinterpret or speak wrong to someone else, and then that just continues down a train. Because I think starting this year, I've kind of become of the opinion that even giving someone the correct information is still handing them a loaded gun.
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to like reptile nutrition, like saying you have to always use calcium or a multivitamin XYZ these days that they like there are things that can go wrong by following bad advice. So it's important to understand or have a better understanding of the aspect whether, and for that example of like the vitamins, the supplements, it would just be as simple as understanding the difference between water soluble and fat soluble vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that one doesn't need to be replenished as regularly while the other does, like calcium.
Well,
And then actually how the D3 cycle works, and then how the UVB lamp plays into that. So everything's tied together.
yeah, well, and you can get even more granular than that. It's like there's surely species that need more calcium than others.
Yeah, it's quite possible,
I mean?
especially
It's
like during seasons, like
or
reproductive seasons, or
yeah. Well, actually, this Snake asked this great question here that Roy answered a little bit in the chat, but it said
that's
it was
from
a question.
Shira.
Yeah, it's a great question. So your photo period has UVBs turning on 3 hours after everything else.
Damascus, which
Damascus
is
suggested that everything
is
going
she
on.
referring to staggering lights?
Yeah,
exactly. So the staging,
Yeah, so basically like what you'd be mimicking is I've had it described by Roman and like Francis and like Quentin and everyone else. It's basically like you're thinking about what happens when the sun actually rises. So like usually with their recommended schedules, and this is how some people do it, not everyone, is the first thing that comes on would be the heat lamps, because when the sun rises, the first thing that changes would typically be the heat. And before that visible light, which would be your, in essence, the UVA, aside from the actual visible light, like your LEDs, that would come after the warmth. So you're kind of staging the lights as in a cascade. So during, like, depending where you live, let's say like between 9 and 11 would be your peak hours. That would be when it's brightest, when it's hottest. Those are just examples, by the way, because it depends where you live. But that was the purpose of the cascade, because you introduce the lights in that order in the way they would logically happen, and then you do
no, Shira gets that conceptually. She was just asking more specifically because in the webinar I had a slide with like a hypothetical like example of this is when your halogen goes on versus this is the LED, this is the UV, and I had those staggered out over a longer period of time than what Thomas Griffiths recommends. He recommends having that whole sequence occur over the span of 30 minutes,
like on a dimmer.
Right? And exactly. Or welcome Dean. Whereas I just have it more spread out than over 30 minutes.
Sorry, I mansplained Shira.
No. You hadn't caught up on the chat part, but it's fine. No,
I'm over here in my own world.
But that's the only reason why is just like that was pretty arbitrary. I like to stage mine a little bit longer, and part of that too is again like what I spoke to in the webinar with the energy usage piece. But I think also for species that are more like very, like for example, very crepuscular, I probably would have them sequence closer together. A lot of the species that I work with are like truly diurnal, like they're most active actually in peak daylight hours. So I'm not as worried about them being able to get all three of those wavelengths necessarily, or those spectra necessarily at the same exact moment in that 30-minute span.
Well, and that brings up another great,
it can depend.
Another great thing to note too is like that slow ramp up and ramp down is not exactly viable for me, because it's actually quite challenging. I mean, again, so this is something that it is a great thing that we have pieces of tech now that can allow you this level of control over your lighting system, right? It's great. But it's not applicable to everything, right? Because if let's take just a basic acknowledgement. Everybody knows this. This isn't news to anyone, but our lights pale in comparison to the sun, period. They're just nowhere near as bright or impressive. It's not even close. It's not even a funny competition, right? And so one of the things here is that if you're already acknowledging a certain lack of power with regard to your lighting systems, and you're dealing with something like a Eurymastix or a collared lizard or a chuckwalla or a xenogama, which is like just peak heat lover, you're actually going to be depriving them more of their peak operating temperature by doing a slow ramp up and a slow ramp down. So it's for me, it's a very short ramp up and then a protracted ramp down, like extended one, and of course it varies by the season, but it's one of those things that, like, one of the interesting things that sets herpetoculture apart from so many other domesticates is that there's so much variability within the umbrella of herpetoculture. You can have everything from a Euro to a puffing snake to a dart frog to a hognose snake, and it's all herpetoculture. You can have a tortoise, a crocodile, caiman, something like this, and all of that's herpetoculture. Whereas if you're like, oh, I have a dog, it's like, okay, we kind of, like you just have more understanding. And yeah, there's some subtlety based on breed and top size and all kinds of weird individual variability, but you can get a base formula that if you follow it, your dog's going to be alive for like 15 years, maybe. Right. So in herpetoculture, that's not really a part of the equation. There's some base fundamentals that you follow, but they're much more conceptual than they are ingredient based, Yeah. So you're having to tease apart more nuance and subtlety from all the decisions through the lens of ecology, which if you don't have it, it's harder to do,
Totally.
So it's the lighting one has been, that's one that I've been really interested in for a long time because of just like the shortcomings of the lighting that we have. And, how do you get it enough for each individual animal, but not overdo it for the whole thing? Cause if you just, at least in my case, if I put 8 lights on every single enclosure, I mean, there's just this place would just rip heat wise, it'd be 120 degrees ambient, and you know what I mean? And so not only are you having to take into account the individual animal that you're working with and like what kind of ramp up it needs, but also how many other enclosures do you have in the space? And like, how do you balance the competing, all of the competing, and then dust. How do you make sure you dust everything and keep it clean so it's a little less likely to start fires and and all this crap. I mean, there's so many weird little things to so many knobs to twist and adjust. It's great.
Totally, especially too if you're keeping like multiple species from different regions, that might be on different photo periods and all of that stuff. I'm kind of spoiled because most of what I'm keeping now is just from one region.
Yeah, same.
And so I can just dial everything in for the same parameters for the most part. Yeah. And kind of honestly, I manage things almost on a by room basis now more than by a vivarium basis. But
same. And the whole room goes up and down together because everybody's high desert, like everybody.
Exactly.
That was definitely a challenge I met when I first started stacking enclosures and why I started building spacers, realizing how much the lower enclosure raises the one. And that was, and then when I got more into Abronia, that was what led me more into learning how to increase ventilation, especially as I switched to larger enclosures. So like the PVC with the solid lids versus an Exoterra glass tank. There's nothing wrong with either of them, but there's different ways to approach it. One, I don't know how to drill holes in glass. That is outside of my skill set.
Yeah.
But PVC, I've modified almost all of mine. So like that was easier to mount fans. But then, that introduces a whole other set of challenges depending on the species you keep. But it was really good for lowering heat by raising ventilation. But like Phil, like with your new place, are you like set up your reptiles set up in like your basement, or is it like a room?
Yeah, basement. Whole basement.
Yeah, so like the care in your approach to something like that could change just by the room they're in, like how the ventilation is. Because some people think like having a ceiling fan on is enough ventilation in a glass tank, but it doesn't really work that way. Like,
yeah, circulation and ventilation are different, right? So
right, yeah, like there has to be an exhaust to dump the heat, otherwise you're just circulating hot air.
Yep,
exactly.
So
for sure. And sometimes, like the biggest thing so before I was in my shop space, I was in a basement like this one, very similar to this one, in terms of style and footprint, and even the year that the houses were built were quite close, and when I moved into the shop, I was constantly fighting the empty overhead space, between the tops of the cages and then the ceiling, because it was, 15-foot ceilings. So everything, all of the heat bulbs, everything was just like filtered through this lens of combating the loss of heat and the dissipation of heat. Mm-hmm. And so it caused my power bill to just be astronomical, because I had like 250 watt bulbs on, like I had a big halogen and then a big mercury on every single enclosure. It was just, and it was still like, there are times of year where it just wasn't hitting the mark. It just wasn't getting to where it needed to be. So I had to use the heater, the heater for the whole shop to like raise up that ambient. It was just it was gnarly. So and now being back here, it feels like I just came back home. It's like, I cut the wattage in half on every enclosure because
it's so nice.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's just so unbelievably cool. Meep just asked, what's the difference between Arcadia and Reptisun UVB? Yeah, these are just two different brands. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, but the lamps.
Shira asked some questions too. I don't want to forget those, just so we'll go back to those. But let's do this one first.
This one was from someone in a Discord server when I was collecting questions. They had originally asked about the Shade Dweller. So I'm not sure if that's but we can give an explanation on both. But between Arcadia and like Zoomed, excluding Exoterra's new lamps, they all pretty much come from the same factory in Germany. They're all the same lamp, with the exception when you look at the Shade Dweller, which is a standard or normal output and a physically smaller lamp compared to the high output lamps. So like if you were to get an Arcadia fixture and put an Arcadia lamp in, take it out, put in one of the Reptisun ones, your reading would be the same. But if you put a Reptisun fixture with the Reptisun lamp and an Arcadia lamp with an Arcadia fixture side by side, the Arcadia fixture will actually have a slightly higher output because of the shape of the reflector. But the lamps are the same. But now Exoterra has released their new lamps, which are, I guess, have a different coating. So they're actually like much higher output. And if I remember correctly, they don't even produce UVC at close range. So I think that's fantastic. That was something I wanted
they're
to
awesome.
Into. Yeah, because
I have quite a few of those here, and I use them on. It's also the reflector too. The reflector is what projects those VHO, the output of those VHOs, like 2.5 times what it would otherwise. Excuse me. And those ones are really an outstanding UVB bulb. And then also the Reptile Systems is making an Eco T5, and it also is going to have, it's got their bulbs with the reflectors are extremely powerful. I haven't gotten like the deck with all the added information from them yet, but it's a pretty good chance it's going to be the most powerful bulbs on the market. Actually, that company's doing some really cool stuff. I love their approach to the way they're branding things and the way they're talking about and the way they're going about like distinguishing themselves by really taking steps. Exoterra is doing the same thing, right? Like that VHO and then their attempt at the LED UV. Those are all good steps in the right direction, even if they're not always going to be the sufficient thing and the right thing for each situation. It's cool to see companies like really kind of diving into some of this tech and some of this new info, and trying to like stay ahead, stay at pace with sort of like the cutting edge of what all these wonderful people that Roy mentioned at the end of the webinar are all that info they're putting out there. It's just great to see people using it. It's a wonderful thing.
Oh yeah,
it's
so
good,
cool.
and it's important too. Like the reason I specifically always mention that those lamps all come from the same factory in Germany too is because I think the only U.S. manufactured lamps that actually tested well that were available were the LEAP habitat UVCs, but I think they've kind of dropped off. I don't know. I've never bought anything from them.
So I haven't seen anything from LEAP recently.
Well, and my understanding too is that even if the bulbs are made in the same factory, if they there's something about the type of phosphor that's in them, right? That is what puts off the UVB, and depending on the kind of phosphor used, it can be a more natural form, or more usable form of output, depending on the type of phosphor. That's I don't know the nitty gritty, but
there's two I remember reading about. I don't remember which one it was, but it was actually what influences the UVA 1 versus UVA 2, and the manufacturers don't normally use both to burn the lamps, so that's why you kind of get one or the other, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I am not up to snuff on the exactitudes personally, but
But to go back to Shira's question, I would do a longer ramp down period, especially if it's a desert species, because you'd think, I don't know, I've never personally been in a desert, so maybe it's better if the guys who live near a desert answer this one.
Yeah, I think longer ramp down is the move. Yeah,
like I'd agree with that.
Deeper ramp up and a protracted ramp down. You know. So kind of like
I know it gets cold in deserts at night, right? But
for sure.
Does it take a while, or does it happen quickly?
No,
it takes a while.
It's not like going in the shade, because I know in like the cloud forests in Mexico, it can be like a 10 degrees difference standing in the shade versus in the sun.
Oh yeah, easily.
Yeah, you can go out June or July, August in the Sonoran Desert or in Joshua Tree. You go out at midnight, it's 90, 91.
Oh yeah,
like it's brutal, and it's not cold until like 3-4 in the morning. And then that's when it really drops off, and it can get like, holy moly, it can just change so abruptly, but it takes a while. It takes a long time.
That's actually something I've been thinking about myself, because I track a lot of like the environments like Abronia or species are found in. And like the consensus that's barely understood is that these species are exposed to cold temperatures at night. Like it can be between 70 to 80. I think I've even seen it above 90 in Guatemala during the day. But everyone always says like the species needs to be kept really cool at night. So we're aiming for like 50 degrees, 60 degrees. But those temperatures aren't actually achieved until like 2-3 in the morning. So it's not like someone hits a switch and it's immediately cold.
Right.
No, it definitely definitely gradually cools.
It's the same thing with those all the Patagonian a lot of the herpetofauna that come out of there. Yeah, like the Phymaturus and the Leolamus and stuff like that. It's high daytime temp and then very, very, very chilly night times. Almost like you'd have to stick them in the refrigerator or something after, just
really, really high UV for those guys too, because like the UVI in those areas is
unreal,
intense. It'll
super intense,
really burn you up.
those are some really unique. The lizards that come out of there are just so cool. Like totally
extremely cool.
And so challenging. I've had
drop some pictures in the chat for people.
Yeah, I kept Phymaturus and Leolamus, and my God, I didn't do the right thing with them. I didn't do right by them. So, I tried, is what I'm saying, but I couldn't achieve it due to the way my setup has been and was at the time. So now they're with people who can do what they give them what they need in that regard. But boy, they're wild little, super strange little lizards. Some of the weirdest things, like miniature chuckwallas, all those Phymaturus, just so bizarre. Anyway, that was tangent.
I'm gonna at least type out how to spell them for folks in the chat if they want to Google them.
Yeah, those are brilliant. And it's so crazy colorful too, from in Chile.
And then Shira said, so that would be UVBs off hours earlier then for that longer ramp down.
Yeah, because if we're going by the logic that the sun is set, but it's still warm, then the visible light, the UVA, the UVB, it would have all dissipated. It would be literally blocked out, right?
Yeah.
And when you do it the other way, when you because I used to do it the opposite, where I'd kick off the halogens and let the UVs run. And when I used to do it that way, I'd get a lot more basking under those UVs from the lizards. They'd be out. And then when I do it the opposite direction, where the UVs kick off and the halogens come on, it's a lot more cryptic. A lot more like inside, like halfway out of a crevice basking, a lot more, like not fully basking all the way and not out per se, but just more, again, kind of cryptic basking, so it's interesting to see the differences when you do that. It's a real trip.
I love that.
Yeah. Phymaturus and Leolamus. Hell yeah.
I'm not even familiar with those.
Oh, yeah.
They're such cool lizards.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then Meet Me had also clarified earlier that they were specifically talking about the shade dweller. So the shade dweller is Arcadia. That's like Savannah spoke to earlier. It's not a high output T5. It's just a standard output T5. So the actual intensity of the light it produces is just much lower. It's a gentler UV essentially, and for that reason, it's kind of intended for like deep understory species or crepuscular species, or if you're utilizing UV, but like you can't get a lot of distance from the actual bulb. The shade dweller sometimes is good for applications where you don't have as much distance from the bulb to the basking area.
And I think that's why they're marketed for like arboreal species. Like I think that's the tag on the box.
They work great they also work well for like Conyxis, because Conyxis.
For what is that?
That's the hingeback tortoises, because they spend a lot of time in the undergrowth,
exactly.
Under trees and a lot of mushrooms, anywhere they can find mushrooms and stuff. They're so, yeah.
Well, that's really
they're just tumbling through the understory. It's so cool.
It is. If they're living in the undergrowth and have reduced access to UVB, you can actually get vitamin D2 from eating plants or mushrooms that have been exposed to the sun. It's not as potent as D3, but it works the same.
For sure. Definitely.
And I have heard some ideas before too. It was probably in a study. I have no idea what the study was. It was basically about how like light reaches the bottom of like dense forests and like rainforests, and it was something about how it reflects off the leaves of the plants and reflects back and forth, and that's how they get the higher exposure. And to me, that was very, very interesting.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I like to create lots of like layered foliage in the setups that I use, is to create like, it's like bouncing the UV around, but it's also creating more cover, right? So like for species that want to cryptically bask, they can find cover a little bit more efficiently, and kind of like, because it's like layered, it's kind of, they can access this really broad spectrum essentially, or broad gradient.
I do this. I do this with basking too, with like the desert iguanas, because desert iguanas so often they're basking kind of inside a creosote, like in and amongst it, so it's really dappled. And so there's two major basking bulbs in the desert iguana enclosure, and under one it's just this huge manzanita clump, and they just sit under there all the time. And actually, it's a great way to tongue feed them too, because they feel extra secure inside that manzanita, and so you can
I love that
tongues between them, and they come grab, because they're not they're so dumb, because they're mostly herbivores, but they'll love them some grasshoppers, I'll tell you that.
When I had my pair, they would go nuts for crickets and grasshoppers. They were so cool. Those are such underrated lizards.
Absolutely powerhouse little, those things are out. Those and zebra tails are just out in like the
literally 120 degrees,
no
like
problem,
ambient temperatures, and they're out
kicking it. They're almost bored,
which is just
they're like, this is all you got, come on.
They're tough as nails.
Yeah, they are.
Really impressive.
Yeah, strange.
I think that that Desert iguanas, I think, hold the record for North American species for like highest ambient temperature while still being like active.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
It's crazy animals. Pretty surreal.
They don't play games.
No, they're the real ones.
So Roy, that comment I had mentioned that was on part 1 of the heating and lighting series in the infrared section. If you, just for the sake of addressing it, the person was asking basically the difference between deep heat projectors and ceramic heat emitters, because people push deep heat projectors as being better or superior or more powerful in some way, but they don't really understand how a ceramic heat emitter or similar product has a more useful application than a deep heat projector. So what are how would you read
So I think in the webinar I suggested basically bypassing DP projectors entirely, because what DP projectors basically, the way they function is similar to the way a halogen would function if you dimmed it way down to like say 50% power or something like that. And so what they emit is primarily infrared B wavelengths, and then also some infrared C wavelengths.
And a tiny bit of
very, very, very small amount. And what we want ideally for our basking fixtures is to produce is to find a fixture that, or an emitter, a bulb that produces a lot of infrared A and B primarily. And then it will also produce infrared C by heating objects in the vivarium that then give back that heat, right? And so a halogen or an incandescent does that really well. It provides that infrared A and B, and then the supplemental infrared C. Whereas the DP projector doesn't provide any of that infrared A. So it doesn't provide any of the near infrared wavelengths that we really want for our diurnal basking species. And sometimes people will say, well, then why not use it for nocturnal species? And I suggest against that, just because under nocturnal conditions, the species in the wild would not be receiving infrared B wavelengths. They're solely receiving infrared C. And so for that reason, I say use incandescent halogens for your daytime heat element. And then if you need a supplemental heat source to either raise your ambient temperatures beyond what the halogen provides, or to provide like nighttime heat, say you live, like we spoke earlier, like if you live in Colorado, but you're keeping something from Indonesia and your nighttime temperatures are too cold in your house, you need them to be up a little bit in the Viv, utilize a radiant heat panel to provide a little bit of ambient heat, again, in the form of infrared C. But in some ways, I don't see the utility of a deep heat projector for most contexts. There are like probably certain like clinical contexts that they might have some benefit. I've heard from like certain veterinarians and stuff like that if it's like, a species that is really shy from light, like it doesn't want to be in direct light, but it still needs some better infrared, like more penetrating infrared wavelengths to support its healing from an ailment or an infection or something like that, then maybe a DP projector provides more benefit than just a radiant heat panel. But again, it's kind of falling into this middle ground of lacking utility when you have better options available. So I hope that's a clear way to say that.
I think so. The only way I would have basically explained it would have been the projection of heat, that a deep heat projector it's kind of nerfed compared to a ceramic heat emitter, which like emits heat in all directions, while the deep heat projector is in a downward cone. And like you said, it's like a dimmed halogen with no visible light. So it's really situational. Like if you wanted to raise your ambience and you have like a very big enclosure during the day. But I think people hone in on, a deep heat projector produces IRA and B rather than just C. People hone in on that and equate it to being better. But like you said, they're not going to be getting that like at night. So it's kind of unnatural, and it's honestly for the purpose of raising ambience, especially at winter at night, it's less effective, right?
Totally. Yeah, and again, part of the reason why I really like radiant heat panels and stuff for like raising nighttime ambience is because it's like a broad projection of heat, which is that's just really effective for raising ambience rather than like a narrow, cone of heat that's provided by a projector.
Yeah.
So, I hope that's clear. Is that good on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. And I did bring this comment up to you too when it was talking about the history of herpetoculture, about someone saying they had a lot of interest they would have a lot more interest if specific species episodes went more into depth about the history of the species, whether it's when they entered the hobby and who was first successful breeding them. Because I know like a lot of people have like the ambition of making some reptiles more available with people wanting to work more with captive born and bred species. And now we're kind of in a position where a lot of the species now breeders are doing a lot of work, outcrossing work that's been done. But so that whole component of them entering this the system, the community is just kind of like swept under the rug. It's kind of distracted in a way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a really great topic, and something that maybe it's something we can explore like down the road. I like the idea of doing like kind of like species spotlight episodes and ideally getting into like the history as we know it within herpetoculture for those species. And like for some species that's like a storied history. You could like talk about corn snakes, for example. It's like that was the first species like really popularized in herpetoculture. There's a very clear lineage of that, and that goes for a lot of the species. And then there's also more obscure stuff like I could give a pretty solid history of Spilotes sulphureus in the U.S., for example, just because I've pretty much witnessed the whole arc. I'd love to do that down the road, because it's really cool to hear the backstory of some of this stuff. And oftentimes what you'll see repeatedly is that it's like the success of this or that species is literally down to like one or two people that really, championed that species to begin with. Otherwise it would have just, disappeared into the aether. So,
I mean, another really unique aspect of herpetoculture is that if you could delve into any section of herpetoculture and find a uniquely interesting history, right? So I've been doing a lot of research and writing lately around like the history of the feeder insect industry and the history of like the development of reptile specific lighting and that world, the feeder rodent industry, or even just the crazy history of the axolotl. I mean, you talk about how certain species have maybe up to a single person. The axolotl is even weirder, because the axolotl, all of them in the world right now that are inside homes, descend from 6 individuals. 6.
Wow.
Like 6 individuals, so right? And they're also all hybridized through genetic modification with tiger salamanders. That's how we get the albino axolotl, is through tiger salamander DNA. That's how you have the glow in the dark axolotls, because they put in the genes for
was it iridophores or something like that?
A what?
It's like iridophores or something.
Something like that. Yeah. But it comes from like a jellyfish, I'm pretty sure. So, you name it, no matter which section you delve into, there's really interesting history there. And that's true, I think, of most every species. Uromastyx too, their history here in the United States just in generally is totally wild, really strange, especially because there's so many of them, so many different varieties.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I love that. I love that stuff. That stuff is, to me, is like some of the coolest aspects of herpetoculture, period. Roy, I think your camera's busted, guy. Oh no, you were just holding really still. I was like, wow.
I was like staring at the live chat, just making sure we didn't miss anything.
That's great. That was really good.
Statue mode.
Frozen. And I was like, dude, statuesque over there. Thought your camera froze. Yeah, no, it's funny. Crazy stuff. Yeah. Like for example, all of the scaling up of insect feeder stuff, like just raising insects at scale, was basically pioneered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and like the U.S. government.
Oh yeah.
And it's like a total mind blower. It's like, wait a minute, that's how it came to be? Or, like crazy things like this, or oh man, honestly, I could just talk about this for hours. Even, the sort of weird serendipitous way that became like a scalable business. The same thing with like the feeder rodent world. I mean, that goes back way further than most people imagine, hundreds of years, to ancient Japan.
I would like to be enlightened.
Oh, sure. Here, let me just review so I'll just pull up. I posted this on my Patreon, but I'll bring it up because it's.
Yeah, because it always amazes me too, like how, I mean, without looking too closely, the aquatics keeping hobby is light years away or ahead of the reptile keeping hobby.
In ways, yeah.
In ways, like yeah. they have devices that are timed or for dosing of tanks, or tools for that, or they have $300, $600 circuit boards, power strips that are all very accurately tuned for not only lighting schedules, but the dosing, the pumps, and everything like that. Like, they're just so integrated. There's just more development in terms of technology. So something like that doesn't necessarily. I consider it not technically necessary if it's something you can do yourself, like whether it's turning your lights on and off manually. But at the same time, it's just kind of crazy. And I feel like we're only slowly starting to get in the direction of like more studies on reptiles and more knowledge, because there's just so much we're still in the dark on.
Sure. Yeah. It definitely feels like some of these other worlds, like aquaculture in particular, have managed to free themselves of other constraints by way of their tech, and it seems like herpetoculture is just, at least up until recently, has taken a different tact, like a slightly different direction for how to deal with those constraints, and how to mitigate them. Yeah, but it goes back to 1787. There was a manual, an illustrated husbandry manual from Edo period Japan in 1787 for waltzing mice, which were the mice that they've got the spin, it's real gnarly. And then went from Japan, made its way to Europe about a century later. And then they were using it as demonstrations of Mendelian inheritance. They were using mice for that. And then there was like a whole, what do you call it? Like a craze, like a rat and mouse keeping craze that popped up in England because of Queen Victoria had like a whole fascination with these things. And she had a personal rat catcher named Jack Black, which is that's like a nutty thing to know, because there's also the actor. So there's that really funny thing. And then let's see, there's more of this here. Then when it came here, it was more with regard to lab work, and like doing, developing lab strains. And there's sort of like multiple prominent lines of lab rodents that are sort of guaranteed genetically to sort of be a specific standard thing, which is mind-blowing in its own right. But there's so much of this. There's a lot of standardization in that world, because again, when you're dealing with lab stuff, they've got to have as much control to understand the certain effects. And then it was just like, sometime around the like 60s, 70s or so, the 70s is when it really, like, herpetoculture started taking advantage of those things, saying, hey, like, I got to feed my snake. Mm-hmm. Can I buy rats from you? Like leftovers, things like this. But there was no, I mean, so much of both the feeder insect industry and the feeder rodent industry are all examples of pre-existing structures that existed in place that herpetoculture co-opted for their own use.
Right.
And it's not until recently that people, not until the last like maybe 20, 30 years at the latest that, or at the earliest rather, that you get things like the use of hornworms or black soldier fly larvae or superworms or, some of these other dubia like roaches, isopods, things like this. They're much, much newer. I even hypothesized when I was writing this, I was like, man, somebody could totally do this with bees. You know what I mean? Like somebody could just, we need more bees, right? Like there's a desperate need for bees, period, because they're dying a lot. And so, maybe scale them up by having some people use them for feeders. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be great because they sting, but you could use the drones. They have no sting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even some species where, depending on the season, like 70+% of their diet is bees and wasps. You know what I'm saying? So there's like straight ground. There's actual ground for because presumably you probably wouldn't even have to have live ones if you're worried about the sting. If they make if they make dried crickets, like desiccated crickets and snails and stuff that you can feed to your animals, you could probably do the same thing with bees. But anyway, that's just another area that's like ripe because it had there was no consideration at all for whether or not these animals would be like viable quality feeders long term. None. It's just it happened to be there. It was an industry that happened to be in place. So it's like that's one of the reasons I admire so much what Dean is doing with Feed My Chameleon, right? By cultivating these insects that are much more natural prey. And, like if you just think about it, like, even if you just put it in pure, like it just raw money, like just put it in terms of raw money. If you have bearded dragons or leopard geckos and you're feeding them mostly dubia or mealworms or whatever, and you start feeding them just grasshoppers, like you just get your grasshoppers from Dean and just feed them grasshoppers, you're probably going to get 5 extra years out of your animal, right? So if you're breeding, there you go. I mean, and it's quality of life on top of all of that, right? So again, resource aware care system, right? Like you use your resources wisely and use it to the synergistic benefit of you and the animals. I love the RACS thing. It just, every time I get to say it, it kills me now because it's still so new. I'm like, RACS. Yeah, I keep in RACS. I keep in resource aware care systems. God damn it. So, so sick. I hope in 20 years somebody's saying that. Like, I got a resource.
Oh, someone will be.
Just keep
God.
So we got a good question.
Yeah.
From Skidia. I have a question. Whenever there is a chance, specifically for nocturnal crepuscular reptiles, how would you go about providing moonlight for them?
That's a really good question.
And then Shira said, I feel like there's a slight light pollution no matter what I do, and that functions as a sort of moonlight for my snakes, ? And then Skidia replied, I have very little light pollution in my room with blackout curtains to keep the heat out, so it is nearly pitch black most nights. It's because of this, I'd like to see if I could provide her some with a bit of an artificial moon cycle for some nights. So yeah, this is a really great question. This is something that I've thought about actually in like in my kind of like dream design, like reptile building design in my head. I have actually skylights throughout the room to provide ambient, both like ambient sunlight, and moonlight specifically because of that. But I don't know of any specific like reptile applications that I could recommend for a moonlight. There's like kind of silly, like there's like a moon shaped, fixture that's made by one of the big brands. I think it's Exoterra, maybe yours, Zumet. I'm not sure which one of those, but it's not something I would recommend. But one thing that I would suggest looking into is back to aquaculture and the aquarium hobby. Look into their lighting because there are definitely aquarium lights that have a moonlight feature.
That's right.
I know for a fact that they do. So
it's mostly blue lights.
Yep.
Yeah, it's mostly blue lights, which is what I would expect. So that's what I would look into, and potentially even seeing if it makes sense to utilize an aquarium light that's meant
it really
for moonlight
depends, like,
for your
depending
herps.
where the species lives. Like,
yeah,
like there might not be a lot of light pollution. I'm not sure. I don't know. It really depends, because if you're looking at like the desert versus like a dense forest, or the species that is kind of adapted to like live in human-made structures, like there's a lot blocking out. But like,
but then it's also so cool because this gets, I mean, we've been talking about like photo periods. Now we got to talk about like lunar cycles, and you gotta pay attention to the moon phase. And I mean, I think that's awesome.
But also, there we go. But you also touched on something there too, Roy, which I think is worth unpacking a little bit, which is you mentioned in your dream setup having skylighting, right?
Yeah.
And I think what that conceptually, what you're kind of illustrating there is the difference between replication and capture.
Yeah.
Right. So you're on some level, again, a quality resource aware care system. A quality resource aware care system will capture more of what's needed rather than replicate, because replication costs money and resources, and it also is just like a strain, not just on your wallet but just on energy, right? And in a perfect world, you want to try to have more capture of existing resources in your space, but not everybody can have a skylight, right? So it is the fun balance here. But
I think that's so well said though. Like I love that distinction between what you just made, because it reminds me too of like when I'm brumating the few reptiles I have here that do brumate. Like I don't put them in a wine fridge, I put them in my shed.
Yeah, that's right.
In my tool shed.
Absolutely.
Because it's like it's a little bit insulated from the elements here, but roughly the element, the conditions in that shed are like pretty good brumation conditions around here, and I don't have to do anything. I can just capture the ambient conditions to meet the needs of the reptiles. And they're also still getting a photo period again, because there's a window in my shed that lets in light.
Right.
They're not getting the same like infrared and UV output during the peak of brumation, but they're also in torpor, so they wouldn't be getting that in the field either. So
I hate that word. I hate torpor. It's just
it's a weird word.
It's like rural root. No.
Yeah.
Do something else,
It's a weird word.
It's a weird word. Clunky word.
Yeah. Rosy Bogue, Fairly Clear Desert Nights. Yeah, it makes me think of Borrego, where it's just like you got these beautiful skies down there. So the moon, I'm sure, influences their movement.
Totally.
I mean, of course, anybody who herps for rosy boas knows that they're paying attention to the moon phase.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's a really cool thing to be considering. It's definitely something I've thought about for my stuff before, but haven't gone so far as to seek out providing it in that way. Mostly because, again, most of the stuff I keep is from dense jungle environments where they're not getting quite as much direct open sky like that. But a really cool thing to look into. And hopefully there's something from the aquaculture world that can suit the need. And if there is or isn't, please follow up with us and let us know what you find, because I'm curious to hear about this.
Yeah, I really like seeing when people make like DIY systems, whether it's taking a Raspberry Pi and programming something to follow a schedule, or making their own swamp coolers, stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah,
I did that for a little while. I had a little indoor swamp cooler that I had to fill with buckets when I had the Anolis equestris. Nights in the small woods. I had like this little swamp cooler that I have just blowing on them, and I'd have like insulation padding surrounding like the swamp cooler and the enclosures to like keep the heat out and then keep that weird cool humid air in there. It was horribly inefficient. Don't do that.
I tried making my own for like the Abronia, but then that's how I realized that they don't really work when it's already humid.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so silly, but I'm getting a kick out of it. So my Thomasi are in the way my basement is laid out. There's like the basement bathroom and the shower, and then there's like a separate room that I think they used to have. You would think it would be for like the washer dryer, right? But it's not actually. It's just like a tiny linen closet type thing, but it's big enough to where I constructed these enclosures for the Thomasai in there. And the cool thing is, so Thomasai are coastal. They live in Oman and on the island, on that island there. I don't remember the name of the island. It starts with an M. It's like Mizrat Island or Maz, something like that. But they're coastal anyway. And so what I'll do sometimes is I'll take my showers in the downstairs basement and I'll crank it hot and just let all that humidity build up and then like wave it into the room, because I just leave the door open to that tiny little room and all the humidity like seeps in there, and I'll just shut it for like 30-40 minutes and I'll be like, okay, ocean spray, you know. They smelt enough, it's plenty of salt in the air, so it's done. So all I need to do is add water now. Not convinced it's doing anything for them, but it's
the ingenuity. It's something
fun to try. Yeah, it's a resource aware care system.
Yeah.
Oh god,
that's what it is.
So dumb. Yeah, that's why I like it so much. It's because it's both obvious and sophisticated, you know, because like,
yeah,
we've all met people with very, very resource. Like, I feel like Ron and Heather, you're keeping all those animals outdoors. That's a deeply resource aware care system in a very intimate way, right? Like,
yeah,
it's beyond recognition, resource aware care, but it's like, but everybody does that on some level. There's some level of resource aware care.
Yeah.
In what you do.
I would love to be able to do that for everything I keep, but there's just no way. But I am planning to make a really cool outdoor like year-round setup for the rattlesnakes, the rehab rattlesnakes that I have here, just because they're literally found on our land. So I know that they would do well here.
No doubt.
But it's going to be cool because I'm going to like construct a hibernaculum and everything, and just they're going to be out there.
What is that?
Around a den, a refuge for their so they can overwinter. They can brumate outside.
I've heard of, like, I have a friend who goes like herping in West Virginia, and he's found like as he's described rattlesnake dens, and as someone who's never seen one, the mental image is intimidating and also awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
They are awesome. If you ever come out to visit here, I'll take you to one.
Oh, good.
Oh man,
it's so fun.
Yeah,
it's so cool. You can.
I definitely believe it. I'm just a bit traumatized from my childhood of being very spatially unaware and running past snakes and not noticing them, and then feeling trapped on the other side, trying to figure out how to get around it as a child.
Yeah.
No survival.
That makes sense.
I think I can do it now.
You made it this far.
Yeah, I have an appreciation for them now, most definitely. But you know, being responsible, I definitely wouldn't want to encroach too much on any wild animal space. Like, it was something definitely nice to pick up from getting into this hobby for sure. Something that was brought up, it wasn't the topic, but it was mentioned. It was like brumation, like people putting like animals in like fridges. And I've seen like with tortoise keepers, I've seen like the videos of people that will actually like go and bury them out in like their yard. And I see it's like a real mixed response. There's either a lot of flack or people who just don't know saying like, oh, neat. And like, I've never had to use my fridge to brumate an animal. I've done it for plants, like when I kept carnivorous plants, especially like Sarracenia and the Venus flytraps. But I mean, like, what is your understanding of that? Like, have you ever actually like used a fridge to brumate an animal?
Oh yeah.
How do you do it? Like, I know people have like repurposed wine coolers to like make incubators, so they can be quite controlled, right?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yes. So the way I've done it more than once is using a wine cooler set at like 48 to 55, somewhere in that range, specifically for collared lizards. You know, because the ranges where most of them would come from would get quite cold in the winter. You know, and so what there was always like a process and a methodology. You know, gradually cutting food and increasing water. A couple of weeks leading up to when they're going to go down, gradually dropping light hours the whole time. And then when it's fine, when you finally reach the end of that time frame, however long you make it, whether it's a few weeks or a couple of months or something like that, then you put them in I would usually use small, basically deli cups, for lack of a better term, with holes and some slightly moist sand, and just put them in there, and they'd be in there for 6 weeks approximately, maybe a little bit more. And they would, occasionally bring them out, give them water. And the idea is that there's like a threshold beneath which, if you don't hit that temperature sufficiently, in other words, a cool enough temperature, then you're not sufficiently suppressing the metabolism, and they could just like wither away if you keep them too warm,
Right.
So you would be quite surprised how completely fine the animals were during the whole time. They sleep the majority of the time, and a lot of this was based on like finding collared lizards under rocks in the winter, where they're, you temp them at 52 degrees, but it's 30 outside the rock. You know what I mean? And they obviously would just stay there for the majority of the time, right? They'd probably never come out. There'd just be no point in it, or at least very rarely come out, and probably mostly just to get water. And the animals would come out of that and take about a week approximately, as you start ramping the lights back up and things like this, to get them back to, slowly ramp them up to like full function. And they would do great. I think there's probably skillful ways to go about doing something like that if you're going to, force the brumation to happen, but usually you can also just sort of let them tell you if they're starting to slow down and it's matching the season, then you can just coordinate with them and gradually ramp things down. I don't think you have to go as far as doing that. I had a buddy who used to leave his windows open and have fans blowing cold air inside to his reptile room. And it would keep the ambient in the room is like 60, maybe lower. But there'd still be heat lights on, so there'd still be basking spots where they could get to 90 degrees if they needed it during the day, which I think is probably the better way to do it. Again, more of that capture rather than replication, so I think it's probably better to do it that way. But it entirely depends on what it is you're putzing around with. I could never do that with a Thomasai. It wouldn't make any sense, because there's no reason for them. They never experienced that in the wild at all, so there's just no point of it. But, for something like a Moroccan Euromastix, where they can be in places where it gets freaking cold, man, it'll get, or in Egypt, it's snowed more than once in Egypt over the last 50 years, and so it's like Egyptians and ornates, they're out there when it gets cold, so it's part of it.
I think that's why it was the idea was so intimidating to me, because it wasn't really understood by me whether people are just one day picking up their animal, putting it in the fridge, or if they were cycling them down, like winding them down. Like that was kind of why, because like I've seen
a gradual thing for sure.
Yeah, like when I was in the Tegu, when I kept my Tegu, like I knew like a breeder who would just kind of like one day decide to pack them up, put them into large totes filled with straw, and then like put them in a shed. Yeah. So there's no like description of the process beyond that. And that kind of circles back to like our beginning conversation, where it's like a process people do that's normalized and not explained. And without that explanation, people could kill animals potentially.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And it's worth always noting too that generally speaking, heat is much more dangerous than cold. Like people worry about their reptiles getting too cold, and it's like, man, you'd have to get it pretty damn cold for them to not be able to just probably be fine. Like it's got to get pretty cold, like usually in the 30s before stuff starts croaking, but you can get real cold. Even very, very heat loving, heat tolerant species can deal with that kind of cold more than, I've been in Arizona in early March and it's 40 degrees in the morning, and chucks are sitting in crevices right where we left them last night, and it's pretty freaking cold in the crevice. It's still 40 degrees in the crevice because it's a rock, it doesn't get warm. And so it's amazing, like that toleration is that ability. And again, it's just like heat, right? there's what something can endure, and then there's what something would prefer, you know, and you're always walking that line between, you may not prefer to get this cold, but it's like same reason I get in a stupid giant tub full of ice every once in a while. And it feels good, but it's also like, I know this is good for me. I'm going to endure it for a few minutes. So, you know, but you also, you enjoy it at some point, but you're electing to go in there anyway. That's a whole nother.
Yeah, it's so true that the heat is so much more dangerous. I mean, it's like
much more.
This is something I talk to people about a lot when I'm doing the rattlesnake, you know, relocation stuff that I do at times. You know, is that like you can't just like go take a rattlesnake and dump it, you know, in the middle of the day, a mile away from where it was, because it doesn't know where it is, and it's going to die from exposure trying to find a place to cool down, you know, trying to find a place to shelter. You know, and on even just like a 90-degree day, which isn't even that hot for here, it gets a lot hotter. That's still hot enough that a rattlesnake is dead within 20 minutes if it can't find a place to get into deep shade or a burrow or under a rock or something like that to cool down. So
I've always advised people when it comes to like lighting, like when they're saying, "Oh, what should I do? My ambient temperatures aren't hot enough." I have always kind of cautioned people with like that it's easier to add more heat than it is to take away, and that definitely feeds off of if you have like a dedicated reptile room, like as Bill explained, like having just an oven for a bedroom if the ventilation isn't there. But
you put them in a beef jerky machine, man.
Yeah.
Like I have heard from like keepers before where they have like cold snaps and like say their furnace goes out or something like that. They can't heat the place and I've heard stories about people like losing animals, and like that's kind of crazy because like for me, I have my Abronia in my living room. Which because I during winter, what I did last year was open the door and leave it open overnight, and it would get to like 17 degrees outside, but the enclosures never dropped below 49.
Right.
So it's
right.
Yeah, I think that those instances where people lost a lot of animals, it was like really, really extreme cold, and it was like prolonged. It was for like a week, you know, and it was like specifically losing species that are from much more like warm regions that wouldn't experience those kinds of cold temperatures naturally.
That's actually a really valid and important point you made just now too. It's that it was most likely prolonged, and it's kind of like my reptile suddenly passed away. Like what happened? Like it's very, very rarely a singular cause. It's usually like a whole system of failures that contribute, like whether it's like gout and the link between like gout and kidney disease or liver disease, dehydration, like it all kind of links together. It's not just like one thing very often that kills an animal.
So true. Yeah, that's so true.
It's important to look at bigger pictures, especially in situations like that, and just being so aware. It is really like this hobby is definitely one of those things like it's so hard to get. You can get a lot of good advice, but you never know what's going to work until you really start troubleshooting things, like especially if you do have a reptile room or you do have a couple species that are sun lovers, and then you also have some that have much, much lower requirements, trying to balance that. Like you have to really get creative, and you have to really be aware.
Yeah, no matter whether you have a single enclosure or 100, you're a conductor, and you're spinning plates, and you have to regularly hit those plates and keep them spinning without them falling off the rails. Now, thankfully, not most of the time it's not as consequential. If you're not keeping up with one plate, it's not going to fall and break most of the time, you know, but it is something that you have to do on the regular. You have to stay on top of things. You have to be responsive. You have to have fail safes, you know, because things can go south. You know, my AC goes out here during the day in peak summer and I'm not home. Well, I better have a way to shut the lights off, you know, because everybody's going to cook, you know? And I mean, maybe not everyone, because most everybody in here is in an open top enclosure. So they would just go to the sides of the enclosure that are cooler and probably ride that out until the end of the day. But still, I'd rather not put that kind of stress on them. It's just not worth it. And I want to cook them, and it's a whole thing, having to spin all the plates, as they say.
Yeah, and Meep pointed out that's why they prefer to stick with beginner reptiles, since a lot of them are more resistant to mistakes. I think that's totally reasonable to choose animals that are more compatible with where you live or your lifestyle.
Well, and I think if you're a breeder, it is probably incumbent upon you to choose resilience, look for resilience, look for flexibility, even if it's not exactly what you like. For example, like I say this all the time, I love me a spicy Uromastyx. That's how I know they're healthy and kicking and ready to rip, is because they don't want me to pick them up. And I'm like, okay, I can feel your muscle tone. You're regularly getting this kind of exercise. Like, I know you're spicy and you're capable. Like, that makes me feel really good. But if I'm sending 90% of them to pet homes, they've got to be flexible and tolerate that. Otherwise, just setting them up for a lifetime of stress and uncomfort or discomfort, right? And I don't want that. So you got to have, on some level, it's just like with dog breeds, right? You have, if you want like an apartment dog, you might get like a Dane because they're lazy and just want to lay around. If you want to get working, if you want to work from sun up to sundown, get you a Belgian Malinois, man, or a wolf dog, right? Like, give yourself some chores, like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's but it's one of those things, like, I think this is the other thing I've been thinking about a lot. And I also heard Heather talk about this on a different show, where she was talking about like the ethical thing, the right thing to do is to choose for animals that benefit from our interaction. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Period. Like, that's the whole point. You don't want to propagate something that, in fact, I heard this way, way long ago from a bearded dragon breeder who, her name was Vicky Dashu. She was real kind to me. She's a great lady. But she even mentioned there was an animal she had. I even remember his name. It was a bearded dragon that they named Sammy. And the thing was just unbelievable, like unbelievable coloration, like the most intense red with blue bars bearded dragon you've ever seen, right? They bred him once and never did it again because all his babies turned out to be deeply skittish. They were just all of them. Like the vast majority of them were skittish in a way that was like, this is a pain in the ass, not just for us, but for the people. And these animals are just stressed all the time. That sucks. You want them to, there's a reason that when you look a dog in the eye, you both release, oxytocin, right? It's because you both evolved to enjoy each other's company and presence and awareness. But that didn't happen. That didn't just happen because wolves are like, oh, I like it when you look me in the eye. It's the opposite. You look at wolf in the eye and they're going to bite you in the dong, right? So what happened?
Or run away.
Yeah, there was an inadvertent selection process for animals that enjoyed our company.
Yeah.
And I think that's the right thing to do. That's like the steering wheel, because the reality is everything we have is getting domesticated on some level. No matter how wild you want to keep it, it's the right thing to make it so they're not bugging out when you go in the cage just to service it. It's just not, it's not fair. Why put them through that every time? It's not fair. So
totally.
It is true. Well, like when you and I were having the conversation earlier about my Agernia, the Hosmeri, how the parents have always been like super standoffish with me. The babies definitely like followed after the parents, but I did sell them to a friend, and they've been in like a classroom for like the school's reptile club, and now he's described them as like his perfect little rock goblins. Like over time they've become very socialized, and all they want
smart.
is food.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I get it. This is one of the reasons, like one of my theories on, we've all seen this or people have heard about this, where you have a reptile shop somewhere and there's an animal there that is just the most docile, trusting thing you can imagine. And so often this is the thing that I still think, people have a tendency to think that like a personality is a fixed state. And with reptiles, it's not. It's a very amoebic shape. really. Like it's changing all the time. And, you know, I can have it like my iguanas, man. I've been working for years with Gregor Mendel to get him chill, and one bad interaction and I'm set back by a year, you know? And so you take that animal at the shop that was so docile and so trusting and so relaxed, and you bring him home and the thing spazzes. Well, there's a lot of contributing factors, not just the change in location, but change in point of view, change of context. You know, that animal doesn't understand, you know, is your cage on the floor, or is it high? Is it front opening? Is it top opening? Like, are there more valuable hiding places that the animal didn't have at the shop, so it felt like it couldn't hide anyway? Like, was it housed with 20 different lizards that none of them bolted when people walk by the glass? It's like, well, of course, because there's nothing around it telling it to flee. There's not that group emergent signal that one animal bolts and the rest of them are like, fuck, we gotta bail, we gotta go. You don't have it, right? So you know, it's a question you get all the time, specifically about Euros, like which species is the most docile? And it's like, it's not like that. It's not a species thing. It's an individual. It's an individual.
Totally.
And it's not, it's individual, and it's how much work and time are you putting in with that animal? You know, like there's a
bit of nature and there's a bit of nurture.
Yeah.
It's both.
You know, it's just the way it is, you know, even here, like passively, there are animals and that for years, you know, maybe they were a wild caught ornate or something, and they were imported in 2020. And for the first 3 years, every time I walk by the pen, they dart for the hide. They just dive in. Well, after a few years, and I'm not trying to tame those ones down you know, like if I've got 100 of them, it would take all day to put in the time with every single one of them. Right.
Yeah.
But even with passive interaction, they get it. And after 5-6 years, fine, pick me up, like not that big of a deal. Maybe they fuss a little bit, but they relax. Maybe they're not so ready to bite. Maybe they're not so tense, and maybe they'll hand feed, you know, you name it. They see you and they recognize over time, okay, this guy's not going to kill me when he picks me up. He's not going to eat me, you know? Yep. So even if they're not like stoked on it, they're not freaking out anymore. But then you have like the iguanas, like where the San Esteban Island iguana is not a huge iguana, but you don't want to fuck around because Gregor Mendel will rip your finger off.
It'll hurt.
That's a powerful.
Yeah.
It's really powerful and
yeah.
dangerous in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, you want to make sure that interaction is not just trusting, but beneficial, because you have to have it. I mean,
there are higher consequences.
Yeah, it's such a high consequence, you know, if he decides today's not the day and I'm not aware of it, well, I could have stitches, and I don't want that. And I don't want to deal with that with him. It's like, you know, it's not worth it. It's like, hey man, I'm just here to be your bro. We're, you know, I'm going to give you some girls next year. Like, we'll be good. You know, like it's all good, man. But you know, it's going to take him a while.
I'm always like confronted by this whole subject of like kind of this whole thing, because like you, Phil, I tend to be drawn more towards animals that have some consequence with them, you know, some spice. And and I'm also not necessarily interested, like the kind of relationship I'm striving for with reptiles is often different. It's different, for example, than the relationship I'm striving to have with Dalva, you know, my wolf dog.
Very different.
It's a totally like the way that I feel met by interacting with the reptiles. And it's also true for like the different species of reptiles that I work with. It feels like a whole different way of being met than the kind of interactions I have with mammals, you know, and with other people and all that kind of stuff. Right. And I think that part of what I appreciate in that, and one of the merits that I see in herpetoculture, is that it offers this kind of intermediary experience with wildness, where it's like they're not as domesticated, right, as our cats and dogs, but they're also not fully wild, you know, in the same way that like a wild animal is. And so it can kind of be a bridge, I think, for a lot of people, especially people who don't have a lot of interactions with wild places and wild creatures, you know, which is the vast majority of humanity at this point. Most of us do not have access to that. We live in urban centers and highly populated places, and it's just not something we encounter very much.
Liminal wild.
And so there's always this tension in me around that, because like I recognize that like the benefit to the animals and their dispositions for domestication, and I'm also attached personally to this other quality, you know? And so it's such an interesting interplay there that I mean, I think that it's not like it's not necessarily like a something that has to be resolved, right? Because this is unfolding it's such a slow pace and over generations, but it's just something that I'm always thinking about.
Well, and it's also there's a practice of presence in it, and just not having an expectation for the interaction, you know?
Oh yeah.
And it, you know, I even think about, so I've recently been diving into a lot with the San Esteban iguanas, right? Because like personally, the first lizards I ever wanted were iguanas. I have had some incredible pet relationships with various iguanas in my life. Rock iguanas, like Cuban rock.
Oh yeah.
Green iguanas, like they hold a special place in my heart for some reason. You know, like,
well, they're so intelligent.
They're so intelligent, man. And these guys, the San Estebans, they're the perfect thing because they're not huge. They're not small, but they're not huge. They are a desert dweller, and they're like really weird and rare and kind of hard. They're like same like Euros, where they're around, but they're not like propagated much, you know. And they're a unique challenge in their respect. But it's important to me to have this interaction with them, you know, to have this relationship with them. And of course, each one is a different one. But anyway, what I was trying to get at with this is I've been doing a lot of research on these guys, and something that I'm reminded of all the time is that people had interactions with these animals forever, right? So the San Esteban iguanas, the Seri people moved them from San Esteban Island. They moved a group of them to a different nearby island that did not previously have the iguanas or the chuckwallas there. And I mean, that's weird. That's herpetoculture. Like on some level, that is a form of herpetoculture. They're moving them to a new place and culturing them there because they're food and, you know, the whole nine. But it's like, there's other examples of that too. I've heard people hypothesize that the Baja collared lizards that live on Tecate Peak were moved by native groups because it's so outside their normal range, and it's just this one local peak, you know. But that can be by way of trade. Like maybe they just brought them with them thinking they're going to trade them for something with somebody else, and they're like, we don't want them. They let them go. Or, you know, or they move them like they did with the iguanas, because it's like, well, we want to be able to pop into this island and get some food if we need it, and not go all the way to San Esteban Island, right? Because the chucks and the iguanas are tasty, you know. So it's like there are
also all kinds of like natural things that could contribute to that kind of thing too.
Sure.
Like the whole like ring species phenomenon, right? Where it's like changing climatic conditions, right?
Yeah.
That create isolated populations and
stuff
like that.
Absolutely.
Which is always so interesting.
It's so interesting, and it's such a cool thing. You know, I think something that I respect a lot about people who breed dogs is like, that's hard work. That's like really hard work. And it takes a lot of dedication. For the golden retriever that I have now, the reason I have her is because people from like 200 years ago decided like, okay, this dog is worth it, needs to be around, let's make more. And so now they're here, and I've got one, and I'm like, fuck, okay, cool. You know, but you get an appreciation for the relationship the more you delve into the history of the animal, like more of an appreciation for what they are and what their experience is, and why you value them, you know. It's just such, I can't imagine, like, I just can't imagine having something and not getting in there, and getting to know that somehow, you know. It just seems like half the point outside of having a great relationship with an animal. It's also just like, well, those iguanas are so cool. Like, I'm pretty hooked on them. I'm quite taken by the San Estebans. They're something else, you know.
They're amazing.
Susan's a real trip, dude. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I think it was an important point that was raised, is and it's kind of like what Roy touched on a little bit. It's like the defining factor of having a great relationship with your reptile is not defined by whether that reptile enjoys or seems to enjoy or tolerates being picked up.
Yeah.
Like in most definitely, like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like, and it is about managing expectations and having that respect or boundaries that the animal has and that you have. Because, like, I have animals that I've had for literally a year or longer, and they do not like me, but I still love them anyway.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. Guys, I have to duck out. My kids, I can hear my kid upstairs. He's losing.
Yeah,
it, so.
No, this is.
Okay.
I was just gonna say we just hit
coming up on an hour and a half.
So I think it's perfect timing, and
Cool.
Yeah, it looks like we got to the questions. And thank you to everybody who participated, who's enjoyed the stream. Be sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah.
We always appreciate that. It really helps boost us in the algorithm. And this is like I said, this is something we're going to be doing pretty regularly. So yeah, tune in when we do and bring your questions.
Hell yeah.
Definitely.
Cool. Saw, dude.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.